and all the things. All the years.
So, I want to just give some context. In Satipatthana, the meditation object that we're focusing on, Joseph Goldstein gave 40 talks on this topic.
It's been around a long time.
Yeah, no, in one go. I mean, it was like one course study, it was 40 talks on this topic, not 40 separate talks over 40 years. And so the point of this is that we could be spending a very, very long time on this subject. So not to worry. Just let it in as it comes, let it mull, let it soak in and, savor it, get what you get. Don't worry about what doesn't stick. This is one of these things like this chocolate cake that we can revisit it many times. It's a good recipe. So in review, last week we looked overall at the context of the Satipatthana Sutta, one of the most important suttas in the 10,000 discourses that the Buddha gave. We outlined the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We've got them up here. And our course objective is to create a culture that emphasizes our human connection and gives us tools so that we can learn and practice a limbic-informed path of the 4 foundations of mindfulness for the point of maximizing joy. And there's a bunch of different kinds of joys. And so I've got this kinds of joy, and we've got these self-relational and societal joys, and I'm hopeful that this can be turned into a Google Doc and shared, and that we can crowdsource it so that as you become aware of different kinds of joy, we can each add the different ways that we experience joy in our bodies, relationally, and in our society, so that this document grows. None of these things are comprehensive. Remember that the sutta's omission, what it does not say, is that it presupposes that there's relaxation. And for most of us, this is not something that we can presuppose. For most of us, this is like quite a significant enterprise. For us to relax is not a small step. So my aim tonight is to look at mindfulness, the importance of the refrain in the sutta, and some of the specific details of breathing meditation. So I used Venerable Analayo's book, the Satipatthana, as a reference, and here is Bhikkhu Bodhi and Yanamali's translation. Majjhima Nikaya number 10 is the middle-length discourses. And then there's also in the long discourses a much more extended form of it with a much more detailed explanation of the Four Noble Truths. So I just want to reread the beginning part of this. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living in the Kuru country at a town of the Kurus named Kamasandama, and he addressed the practitioners thus. Sisters, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this, Sisters, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbana, namely the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And what are the 4? Here, sisters, a sister abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. They abide contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetous and grief for the world. And she abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetous and grief for the world. And how, bhikkhus, does a bhikkhu abide contemplating the body as a body? Here a bhikkhu, gone to the forest, or to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded her legs crosswise, sets her body erect, and establishes mindfulness in front of her. Ever mindful, she breathes in. Ever mindful, she breathes out. Breathing in long, she understands I breathe in long. For breathing out long, she understands I breathe out long. Breathing in short, she understands I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, she understands I breathe out short. She trains thus. I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body of breath. And she trains thus. I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body of breath. He trains thus. I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formations. And he trains thus. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formations. Just as a skilled turner or his apprentice, when making a long turn, understands I make a long turn, or when making a short turn, understands I make a short turn, so too, breathing in long, a bhikkhu understands I breathe in long, and he trains thus, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formations. So we begin with the establishing of mindfulness in front of her. So mindfulness, the Pali word Sati here, is not concerned with recalling past events, but functions as awareness of the present moment. This is Nyanaponika, Nyanavira, and Rhys Davis. Sati is required not only to fully take in the moment, but to bring the moment back at a later time. So Sati is involved also with memory. But in the sutta, the primary concern is not memory, but present moment awareness. So it has many nuanced illustrations by similes. For example, when a cow herd is watching cows with a nearby ripe crop field, there's a kind of an alertness and a kind of vigilance that's needed to keep the cows out of the crop field. But once the crop is harvested, the cow herder is able to relax, sit under a tree, and watch from a distance. Sati was used to describe the calm and detached type of observation once the crop was harvested. So there are many different nuances of Sati, but they can be summarized by the qualities of being alert, receptive, equanimous, observation. So I want to read the refrain. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as the body internally, or she abides contemplating the body as a body externally, or they abide contemplating the body as a body both internally or externally. Or as he abides contemplating in the body its arising factors, or she abides contemplating in the body its vanishing factors, or they abide contemplating in the body both its arising and vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness, and she abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. And that is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as the body. So the scope of the practice includes internal and external phenomena. Nature is to arise and pass away, we know that. But when we put the refrain as something that intersperses each of the different frames of reference, then what it does is that it highlights that impermanence and practicing with an attitude to gain understanding and free from clinging are the objectives of this meditation. It highlights, this refrain highlights that knowing what is going on in the people around us is part of right mindfulness. it's important to know that the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness looks at body sensations, thoughts, and feelings. We can see that. Feelings, mind objects, and Dharma, that's part of it. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a sense of what's happening in these domains for other people. And so how can we know what's going on for feelings, what's going on in these mind objects? How can we know the kind of contemplations that people are doing? Well, what we can do is we can observe with awareness other people's outer manifestations, their postures, their facial expressions, their tones of voice, to give us clues about what's happening for them. But what's important to realize is that the Buddha gives us the encouragement to practice relationally. That's actually embedded in the sutta. That it's not an extraordinary thing. It's actually part of the meditation. So the refrain asks us to contemplate the nature of arising, the nature of passing away, the nature of both arising and passing away. And by staying it in this kind of a way, there's a temporal progression which leads from observing arising and then focusing on disappearance to a comprehensive vision of impermanence. In the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, one of the other really important suttas, the Buddha expounds on the 5 aggregates of form, feeling, perception, sankhara, and consciousness. And from this exposition, he concludes that anything impermanent cannot yield a lasting satisfaction, and therefore does not qualify as I, mine, or myself. Now, it's been always a curiosity to me that I, mine, and myself, according to the Buddha, needs to equate with lasting satisfaction. And if it doesn't equate with lasting satisfaction, therefore, we cannot posit that it is I, mine, or myself. And so all kinds of stuff we grab hold of and we think, oh, that's me, that's mine, that's myself. And very rarely are the things that we're grabbing hold of and identifying with lasting or deeply satisfying on that kind of a level. And so it's just like as a kind of like highlight or a contrast or a question. You know, if we bring lasting satisfaction as, if it's lasting satisfaction, then we can identify with it. It's like a way of revealing the kind of stuff that floats through that we grab onto. And we say, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I am, as some way of giving some context. So all of this is prelude. This is even before we've gotten to the meditation instruction. This is like helping us get set up. Breathing, body postures, clear awareness in daily life, anatomical parts, elements, and the process of decomposition of death are what are contained in the 1st foundation of mindfulness. And so in this progression, when we look at it, there's a general flow from the more obvious aspects of our body and goes into more details of what actually comprises and how do we understand our body. And when we use, one of the things that I really love about Analayo is that he contrasts the Theravadan scriptures with the Mahayana scriptures. And in the Mahayana scriptures, they reverse the order. And so they start with body postures, clear awareness in daily life, and then they go to breathing. And so particularly from that progression, you can see the progress from more coarse to more subtle. So Mara, or defilements, cannot overcome one with bodily awareness. So when our attention is rooted and suffused in our body, we cannot be inundated with defilements. So note to self, this is really important. Our agitation, our restlessness, our anxiety, our fear, it cannot take root if our attention is suffused throughout our body. So this is not like practice for babies. This is not like what you do as like a nursery school before you get to kindergarten. This is like hugely important. And I can't underscore that enough, how important body awareness practices are, particularly when we're navigating limbic injury, to learn how to feel joy and pleasure and relax. So in the Kayagata Sati Sutta, they give a bunch of different examples. And 3 of them, I couldn't follow how this had anything to do with why Mara can't overcome one with body awareness, but 2 I could kind of get my head wrapped around. Fire can ignite dry wood. An empty jug can be filled with water. In the same way, Mara will find an opportunity in those not well established in mindfulness of the body. But fire is not possible to ignite with wet wood. And you cannot fill a jug that's already full. You can't add more to it when it's already full. And so Mara is not able to overpower those who develop mindfulness of the body. So in our day-long retreats, was it you, Michael, that brought up concentration? Or was that Miguel? Yeah. Venerable Analayo goes into this long exposition about the power of the 4 foundations of mindfulness as both a path of concentration as well as a path of insight, and then speaks at length about the value of concentration as a practice for purifying the defilements, which then sets us up for different ways and deeper kinds of insight. So I think you were actually right on the mark. I was just, at the end of the day, and not able to respond more fully. Yeah. But because this particular meditation instruction can be used for both concentration practice as well as insight practice, is one of the reasons that Venerable Analayo is hypothesizing why it is so highly regarded. So of the 10,000 suttas, discourses that the Buddha gave, this one stands head and shoulders above all the others as one that is hugely important to know. Note to self, It's like, this is important. We should know the sutta. So even though contemporary teachers don't emphasize samadhi, saying that insight is possible without achieving the deeper absorptions, the value of purifying the mind from defilements are many. And deep peace, pleasure, joy are some of the most exalted states that can be known in the conditioned world. So from our own personal perspective of cultivating joy, then any of us who are able to actually allow our minds go into unification are going to be able to experience that deep pleasure that comes from that. So from the perspective of meditation instructions, breathing meditation is one of the most widely used forms of meditation objects. And what was good for the Buddha is good for all of us. The Buddha, he called it a noble and divine way of practice, and his own personal awakening took place while meditating on the breath. Yeah. So, I like to think sometimes in these silly ways, So there are many different suttas that talk about breathing, and there are many different systems of meditation instructions that deal with breathing. The 2 most common ones are the Foundations of Mindfulness and the Anapanasati Sutta. The Foundations of Mindfulness describes the breathing in 4 steps, and the Anapanasati Sutta contains 16 steps that can be broken into the 4 categories that we have in the Foundations of Mindfulness. So when we apply ourselves and bring the meditation of the breath into fullness, into fruition, we can experience insight, concentration, we can experience the value of overcoming worldly kinds of aversions and attractions. We can attain unification of mind, we can experience the jhanas, and we can feel and know directly for ourselves the liberation from suffering that comes from greed, aversion, and ignorance. It's good stuff, you know. So I also want to highlight that in the beginning of the sutta, when we set it up, the Buddha speaks about where are suitable places for practice. And he talks about at the root of a tree, in an empty hut, and in a quiet place. And so traditionally, meditation is considered supported when we are away from the hustle and bustle, the chaos, the input of ordinary life situations. And there's discourses that talk about, you know, good places of practice, and good places of practice is where there's not a lot of work projects going on. So write off monasteries right away. Because they've always got a gazillion work projects going on, you know? And so in our modern day world, you know, we have teachers that instruct how to practice no matter what's going on, no matter where we are, to do breathing when we're standing in line at the grocery store, when we are at a stoplight, when we're in a committee meeting, when we're texting. You know, it's like, you know, instead of having this big, huge divide that separates practice to these formal situations and everything else goes to hell, we're interested in bringing the meditation more and more into the various different parts of our life. Yeah. The value is that when we do have a formal meditation practice that we set aside for time that is dedicated and is conducive, oftentimes what happens is that the depth of cohesiveness of mind is something that we notice, and we get the benefits of deeper concentration. So for this reason, you know, it has been suggested, especially if you live in a household that's busy, or if you have partners that are noisy or have needs of you when they are awake and you are awake, is to wake up when they're not awake and to do meditation at times when you've got the house to yourself. So Deepa Ma was one of my deep inspirations, and she never ordained. She never lived long-term in a monastery. She just did practice, and her home was her practice place. And she was like the patron saint of lay people. And mostly the demographic of her students were these Calcutta moms who were living in India with a gazillion children and all kinds of household duties that they needed to take care of, as well as babies that they were nursing. And she just insisted that they get up before everybody got up and had time for practice before the household chaos began, and to just have time. But she was also insistent that when moms were nursing, that they use the nursing, the breastfeeding of the babies, as a meditation experience. So that more and more of life becomes inseparable from meditation, and we're not split between formal meditation practice and daily life. So the two are true. It's helpful to have formal practice where it is clear and quiet and we are in a special place. And it is helpful to include daily life, as much meditation in as much as daily life as we can. So then moving to the breathing, the actual instructions on breathing in. So the breath meditation instructions speak about becoming aware of the length of the breath, but not to control the breath, to know whether it's a long breath or a short breath. And as the breath and the body relax and become calmer and more refined, the breath gets shorter. The Anapanasati Sutta explores the breath through the body experience of breathing, to feelings, to mental events and insights, showing that the breath can be a skillful tool in all of these different components of self-observation. Both the Anapanasati Sutta and the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, Satipatthana Sutta, experience the whole body and calming the bodily formations. The whole physical body as well as the whole body of the breath. So these are technical ways of understanding that our breath is not limited to the anatomical regions of just our lungs, but it physiologically, metabolically, energetically, it spreads out and reaches to the full extent of our bodies. As we calm ourselves, our nervous systems unwind and relaxes. And this is critical. And it's particularly important when we've got limbic injury. The challenge is when we're really wigged out, is that we often cannot focus on our breath. It's way too subtle. We need things that are much bigger and that are moving and that are not so internal, because usually when we focus our attention internal, our systems go into a reaction rather than into a settle. So as I said on the day-long retreat, when we're navigating limbic injury, we need to be selective about the way that we use these classical meditation instructions, because there are ways and times when they're not applicable. So the difference between concentration and insight is that concentration is focused on just mentally knowing the presence of breath, whereas insight is interested in the various changing phenomena connected with the breath. But what's important for us is that joy and happiness come with breathing. It's both a result of concentration as well as a result of insight. So we're in good company. We're doing what we need to be doing. So in review, Satipatthana, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, is a very significant sutta, as it contains instructions that support both concentration as well as insight. Sati is mostly concerned with mindfulness of the present moment. The refrain encourages us knowing each other and using our meditation practice in relationship. Our way of knowing others can be done by observing nonverbal signals. The refrain also encourages familiarity with impermanence. The awareness of the body progresses from coarse to subtle, from body postures, clear awareness in daily life. If we use the Chinese system, then it goes to breathing, the anatomical parts, the elements, and the process of decomposition after death. What's really important to remember is that for someone who has a suffusion of awareness in the body, we cannot be overcome by defilements. So, there we have it.